Pauline Tully.
Mágat go hiarlacht, and I want to confirm I'm in Leinster House. And look, I want to say a good welcome to the members of the HSE who have come here today to address the meeting, and thank them for their submission. I suppose Deputy Wynne referred to the fact that the Progressing Disabilities Service model was established in 2010, and just wondering how come it has taken so long to roll out this model. Was it a funding issue, or what were the issues behind it? Because you've indicated that 31 of the Children Disability Network teams have been established out of the 91 that are intended, and that all of them will be established by the end of Q2, which is welcome. So I'm just wondering how come it has taken so long. I suppose after housing, I would say the issue that that I'm most contacted about are waiting lists in relation to assessment of need, or in relation to accessing therapies or supports or interventions for children with disabilities. And while I welcome the Progressing Disability model, on paper it looks brilliant, but a lot of parents are very sceptical that it's going to improve things, and I really do hope it does. So, I mean, the waiting list for services with Enable Ireland and then the HSE, for some parents have told me that it could run into years. And I'm wondering how is this backlog going to be addressed? Have extra staff been recruited? Also, I mean, I've been informed, I don't know if this is true or not, maybe you could confirm it, that some therapists have been diverted to carrying out assessments, and therefore the waiting list for the interventions have grown longer as a result. Now, even whether that's true or not, irrespective of which answer you gave me, the waiting list for interventions is long anyway, and I'm just wondering how it's going to be addressed. Also, many parents tell me that even if they do receive supports, or their child do receive supports, it's very little, that they might only have a speech and language therapy session once every few months, a couple of years. So is the frequency of intervention, are the frequency of interventions going to increase as well? I'm also going to ask if behavioural analysts will be part of the team. For children with autism, especially if they're non-verbal, there are people there who have qualifications in analysing behaviour and working with children with autism, and I'm just wondering if they're part of the team. Also, speech and language is one that comes up a lot, especially with children with Down syndrome, and many parents would say to me they really need the intervention before they go to school, but it's often 2 or 3 years into school before they actually have access to any speech and language support. I do welcome the fact that you've said that existing supports with special schools are going to remain, and that I welcome that. That's excellent. But I'm wondering, is there going to be a link with schools anyway? Is there going to be a strong link between the team and the school, whether that's a special school or a unit within a school or a mainstream school? And is there also going to be a link with CAMS, and how does NEPS fit into it? Is that part of the team, or is that still going to be based within the school? And also, I suppose one other thing is, often parents say to me the biggest issue is when their child reaches 18 and they're transitioning from children to adult services. So has any work been done on making that an easier process? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pauline.
Thank you, Deputy, and I'll address your really good queries, and also include my colleague Breda Crehan-Roche, because you did mention specifically the ASD element of the challenge in the system. So, why is it taking so long? Well, the development of the Progressing Disability Services policy, I think, based on what we've been talking about earlier, has been about consulting and bringing together children, staff, in order to understand and look at models in other jurisdictions and agree how best to provide child and family-centred supports. That did take time in order to try and get people to coalesce around what would be the best model for Ireland, because often we do look to models overseas, and we do need to think about, well, how does that work in an Irish context so that we can contextualise it. So we also paid a very heavy emphasis on trying it out. So a number of regions did pilot this initiative. So the Midwest and in Kerry in particular went through a reconfiguration process. So we did want to see how did it work and refine as we were going along. I think in making the significant changes that we're making, which is you've got multiple organisations and agencies delivering supports in their own way, and it's not really connected or joined up. And that includes the HSE, by the way. Now, bringing all of those multiple entities, including the state, together to agree, can we organise this in a way that actually makes it simpler for the child and the family to access one team rather than multiple organisations? That did require a significant level of negotiation and, to say, mediation with the trade unions, but also with organisations around, look, if we put the child and family up front, how do we actually deliver this service so that actually it's seamless for the children? I'm delighted that we've done that. It's not perfect, by the way. I'm not saying it's all rosy in the garden. It's not at all. But actually, you know, we're absolutely by end of Q2, we're on track to have those 91 networks in place. And just to say that there's over 40 in place, as distinct to 31, Debbie. And we will come back and clarify where they are actually, so that you have sight of it for yourself. And I'm going to ask Angela again to address the waiting list initiative piece, but just to keep in mind again, as I said before, we had an additional resource given to us last year of 100 posts, another 100 posts for this year. It's not enough. We need more. So we will be relying on the capacity review report to actually build the competency of those teams, as in more staff coming in. You mentioned also the issue of the kind of connectivity between CAM services, and I think you could say primary care services, as well as the education services and NEPs, etc., etc. I referenced before, and we will provide you to the committee a copy of what we call our national access policy. So it is a policy that helps determine how we assess and stream children into the right service, and that includes how children can access CAMS and mental health service, because that's a key concern for us, particularly in relation to behavioural supports, because you identified that quite rightly as being a significant concern for families. So yes, behavioural management supports will be a key part of what networks will do. So they will have access to psychology services, okay? And at this point, I think it would be useful, because ASD is a very significant concern that we have. We do have an improvement programme which includes parents as well as people with autism themselves on how we're going to develop more and better supports in Ireland, because it will align and dovetail very well with the work that Breda Crehan-Roche, who's the chair of the initiative, who's the chief officer in the West, by the way, and Breda might talk us through what that initiative is about. And then separately, a key concern for us, Deputy, is you know the old phrase that actually culture eats strategy for breakfast. So if there isn't a fundamental change in how clinicians work, well, then you can pour all the resources you want in, but if we don't have standardised norms or how we do interventions, and that we have a system where we do only assessment, we create a waiting list here, and then we create another waiting list for intervention, that has to stop. And we have to move to a scenario where children from the get-go are on an intervention pathway, because assessment is ongoing. And I think Professor MacLachlan has a lot to say about that, because he's going to be leading on an initiative to do with how we might work with clinicians about doing things differently with children and families. So two pieces, if that's okay. The first piece to do with the Autism Programme Board, and the second piece around capacity building amongst clinicians. And then, Angela, you might just reference again the assessment of need piece, if that's okay. If that's okay, Chairman.
Absolutely. Angela.
Yeah. Hello there, Chairman, and thank you, Deputy, for those questions. Just in relation to, you mentioned CAMS and NEPs and that, and just to say that in relation to the National Access Policy, we will be setting up in each of the areas an integrated children's services forum, and that is made up of primary care, social care, mental health, the acute sectors if they are required, also TUSLA and many other stakeholders. So that's about decision making. It's about everybody looking at the needs of the child and their families and working together to best meet their needs. In relation to we have a service improvement board in relation to the autistic community, and I chair that, and that is made up of people with lived experience, parents, family members and various clinicians, again people from primary care, mental health, disabilities and many other stakeholders as required. And they were looking at areas such as awareness, and that's one pathway which is so important, that we educate people, and we also bring an awareness for people in relation to what is autism, and people with a lived experience obviously have a crucial part to play in that. We also are looking at pathways for diagnosis and assessment, and we're also working, I know the Minister recently announced a knowledge hub and a phone line, so we are working very closely with various colleagues in relation to that. Progressing disabilities, you've talked about, and certainly behaviour support is very much part of that. And, when people work interdisciplinary, they have access to many other disciplines, and then that is important. And that is, I suppose, the beauty of progressing disabilities, that we share, and that we have all of these colleagues helping and assisting each other in the best interest of the child and the family. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Now,
okay, sorry about that. Thanks, Deputy Tully, for the question. And I think really you sort of hit the nail on the head there in terms of the relationship between intervention and assessment. And to be honest with you, historically, this has been a real difficulty, because we haven't had a standard way of approaching how to do assessment. So the way in which one clinician that would do an assessment in one part of Ireland might be entirely different from the way in which another clinician would do it. And what that has led to is clinicians being very conservative and spending a lot of time doing assessments, because sometimes, to be frank, they've had concerns that there might be litigation against them if the assessment wasn't done in an appropriate way. So some of the work that's been going on around this for a number of years has been to introduce a standard operating procedure, which indicates the appropriate way that clinicians should do this, and it gives them guidance and helps to streamline what they're doing. It also gives them, if you like, protection, so that they feel safer about doing shorter assessments. And because they can do shorter assessments, there's more clinical time available to actually do the intervention. And so what had been happening was that we had these long waiting lists building up for assessment, and then even longer waiting lists often for intervention, and that's an entirely unsatisfactory way to approach this. And so we've got various initiatives going on at the moment which are encouraging clinicians to see initial assessment not as a one-off activity, but as something that is continuous and ongoing. And is, of course, informed by the consequence of the sort of intervention, the sort of supports that you offer somebody. And the money that the ministers made available has made a huge difference, as you've been hearing, in terms of reducing the waiting lists. And we're very much aware that we do not want intervention waiting lists to build up. And in fact, many of the interventions are often, if they're targeted, they can be quite simple and cost efficient, and they can produce a significant difference. But up until very recently, we were blocked from being able to do those because there was so much emphasis put on the assessment. So some of the work that we're doing is in relation to trying to build confidence, trying to build models of service around these things that are evidence-based. As my colleague Breda was saying, they're all informed by the views of service users. So there's a huge amount of activity going on around here in terms of the autism model of service that we're in the process of developing. For instance, that has representation from CAMS. We're also going to be consulting with NEPs, as you were mentioning there. And we're very much aware of the huge sensitivities around transitioning. And transitioning is a problem created by our services. You know, people's life is a continuum. And the way in which we orchestrate our services cause the problems for transitioning. So we're very much aware of those, and we're addressing them in a number of different models of service that we're currently developing.
thank you. Thank you very much.